Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Poole, and my guest is Scott Ritter. Scott and I are going to talk about a number of subjects, but we're going to start with his assessment of Julian Assange. So I saw some stuff that you wrote on your Substack. What's your opinion of um, Julian Assange and what happened to him ultimately?
Well, I mean, I've been a big supporter of Julian Assange, especially in recent years, where I have opposed his incarceration at the hands of the United Kingdom at the behest of the United States on charges of espionage. Um, I believe that he didn't commit espionage. I believe that Julian Assange was a publisher, and as a publisher, he is imbued with certain inalienable rights, and one of those is rights that revolve around the ocean of free speech and a free press. The United States was angry at what Julian Assange had published. We know that they took it personally. Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, Assange published emails that were embarrassing to her and the United States because they exposed them as liars, literally. I mean, incapable of telling the truth, saying one thing to a national representative in person and then writing a memorandum behind their back saying something else. She asked in a meeting, why can't we just drone him and kill him? The Secretary of State asked why the United States can't just kill Julian Assange. That's the level of threat that he represented, and people need to understand. Um, you know, please, people understand that if Hillary Clinton is talking about droning Julian Assange because his exercise of free speech and the free press is deemed as an existential threat to her, she'll drone you, and the U.S. government will drone you. That's what made Julian Assange's case so important. Look, his personal story was very compelling as well. Married, children, separated from his family, tortured in isolation for 5 years in Belmarsh prison, the maximum security prison. Again, a guy who is not a violent criminal, isn't accused of committing a violent crime. He's simply accused of exposing the lies of the United States, and now the United States perpetrates violence on him. Mike Pompeo, when he was the CIA director, openly talked about assassinating Julian Assange in London, having CIA operatives go into London and oversee the assassination of Julian Assange.
Scott, let me ask you a question. Was this with the full backing of England? Did they fully support what we were trying to do?
Well, they arrested him and kept him in prison, didn't
Oh
they?
boy.
So I think the question answers itself. It was not Americans who went into the Ecuadorian embassy and uh, violently seized Julian Assange and extracted him. There was the British that did it. And then they took him to Belmarsh prison where they tortured him for 5 years. Whether the British would have allowed Mike Pompeo's CIA operatives to assassinate Julian Assange in London is another question altogether. But it doesn't matter. That what matters is that the director of the CIA was talking about killing somebody because they published information embarrassing to the United States. I wonder what the director of the FBI thinks about Americans here in the United States who publish things that are embarrassing to the United States. So that's what this was all about. This was about defending the Constitution, defending freedom of speech, defending freedom of the press. Julian Assange became the tip of the spear. He was the battle. This was the fight. It was an important fight, one that needed to be fought. We needed a way to confront the United States government to breathe life into the 1971 Supreme Court decision, the United States versus the New York Times, which was about the publication of the Pentagon Papers, where Daniel Ellsberg was being charged with espionage. The Supreme Court came down on the side of publishing these. They said it's the duty and responsibility of the Americans to publish information that exposes the lies of the U.S. government. And the U.S. government cannot hide behind a wall of secrecy to deny the American people access to this information. But over the years, this Supreme Court decision has lost its luster. People have forgotten about it. It you know, and we've made so many compromises collectively as a nation in terms of giving up our rights. One only needs to reflect on the Patriot Act, which to this day, I don't believe anybody in Congress has read in its totality. But every year, Congress votes to, or every couple of years, Congress votes to continue the Patriot Act, and especially the provisions of the Patriot Act that enable the intelligence and security organs of the United States to illegally intercept the communications of Americans, a violation of our Fourth Amendment. So, this is where we're at today, or that's where we were at. Julian
Now,
Assange, go ahead.
do you think that journalists in this country fear stepping on people's toes, the establishment's toes, because of what they did to Assange?
100%.
Oh,
100%. All journalists in America today are cowards. All journalists, all mainstream journalists today are cowards. There's not a brave one out there. There's a lot of what we call alternative media journalists like yourself. Some people consider me to be one. I know Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Garland Nixon. We could go on. The list is endless of brave people who are out there telling the truth. But ask Max Blumenthal what it was like to have a law enforcement raid his house because he dared challenge the government's narrative. Ask people who have had their YouTube channels shut down and demonetized because they dare say things that run afoul of the U.S. government. We now know the U.S. government has the ability to put pressure on these private social media entities to deplatform people. That went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, although their ruling said that the petitioners had no standing, the action that was in that resulted was that it gave the Biden administration a green light to continue to suppress those people who oppose the official stance taken by the Biden administration. That's not free speech. That's a dictatorship. That's fascism. And that's where we're at today. So find me a mainstream journalist that claims that he or she isn't chilled by this, and I'll call them a liar to their face. Straight up call them a liar to their face. Find me a publisher that says, I have the courage to buck the United States, to go against them. I'm going to do what the Washington Post and the New York Times did in 1971. I'm going to publish the Pentagon paper. Liar. Straight up liar. So yeah, the intimidation factor is there. And it's even more so because, I can't tell Julian Assange what to do. He had to make his own decision. And the decision, frankly speaking, was made for him. He was going to die in prison, in a UK prison. He would never see his wife, never hug his wife, never be with his wife, never hold his children again, unless he copped a plea. So he did. He pled guilty to a single charge of conspiring to commit espionage. He pled guilty in a U.S. court, and then they released him. There are some restrictions to what he can and can't do. He's not allowed to file for a Freedom of Information Act to find out the truth of what happened here because the U.S. government doesn't want that exposed. And I think the more we reflect on it, I think we find out how weak the American government position was. I mean, again, it's easy for me to say, but I'll just say right now, people say, Scott, you weren't ever in Julian's shoes. I don't know. I was told I was going to jail for 40 years unless I pled guilty to a crime I didn't commit. I did go to jail where they tried to kill me. They put me in isolation, decided to break me so that I would plead guilty. I wouldn't plead guilty. They put me in prison, turned me loose on a population that was told to kill me. They didn't. And I eventually was paroled, even though I didn't plead guilty to the crime, because I wasn't guilty, and I will never plead guilty. And the prison recognized I wasn't guilty, and they allowed me to be paroled, despite the fact that the parole board said, we can't parole him because he hasn't pled guilty. The warden said he isn't guilty. Get him out of here. And they got me out of there. My personal take on things is that if you're innocent, you never plead guilty, no matter what the consequence, no matter what the consequence.
Mhm.
But that's me. Julian Assange is a different person. Julian Assange pled guilty so he could be with his wife and his children, and I will never condemn him for that. But understand that in doing so, this is a huge defeat for the First Amendment, a huge defeat for free press. This is a huge defeat for America, for the American people to allow their government to put the pressure on Julian Assange that they did, to um, pressure him into copying a plea, pleading guilty to a crime he didn't commit, is a defeat for us all, every single one of us. And I firmly believe that had Julian taken this thing to an American court, he would have won. I firmly believe that the First Amendment issues would have been ultimately decided in his favor. I firmly believe that a writ of habeas corpus could have been presented to have him released. But it was a gamble. It was a gamble. There's no certainty of outcomes, especially when going to the court that he was going to, which was a court handpicked to that, where conviction rate is near 100% on national security issues. It was a huge gamble. It was a gamble that Julian, his lawyers, and his family weren't willing to make. But in making sure that they can have a quality life together, the price that was paid by all of us is immense. And we need to give Julian Assange all the love and respect that we can. We need to wish him the best for his family. But we need to understand that this was a huge defeat, and we can never allow this defeat to stand, that we must stand up and we must push back against the US government. That when the time comes for us to publish something that exposes the lies of the US government, we have to be willing to go to court. We have to be willing to stare down a prosecutor. We have to be willing to stare down a judge. And we have to be hopeful that the American people will rally around us, or else what the hell are we as a people? We're nothing. We are nothing. And I hate to say that on July 5th, the day after we celebrated, the independence of America, on the notion, premised on the notion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, there ain't no liberty if you don't have the First Amendment. There is no liberty without the First Amendment. And today, the First Amendment is dead.
But he was not an American citizen. So does that have ramifications for journalists all over the world?
Of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, we don't live in a day and age of journalism. The United States, if they can reach you, they will get you if you publish something that they object to.
Mm-hmm. So, you and I have done interviews for quite a while, and it's amazing. I watch other, people talk, and do you think that the government censors everything that's on YouTube?
No, I think that there's a threshold. I think,
Okay.
let me put it this way. Have you ever had a video go near viral?
Not viral, no.
But you've had a video get a lot of looks,
Yes.
and then did that video get taken down?
No, never.
You've been very lucky. So in some ways, I hesitate to wish you success in the future, but I do believe there's an algorithm out there that if you achieve a certain set of parameters in terms of the data associated with what you're doing, that can be interpreted by the government as beginning to tip the needle of public opinion,
Mhm.
they will come in and they will shut you down.
So, I mean, there's got to be a point where the American public realizes that they're being hoodwinked,
No,
right?
no. See, I did an interview with Dennis Kucinich. He's the former congressman from Ohio who's running for
Yep.
Congress again as an independent. I love him to death. Dennis happens to believe in the American people. He believes that they're fundamentally good. They're fundamentally intelligent. They just, they're too trusting, he says. I disagree. I think the American people are too stupid and too lazy. See, I'm not running for office, so I don't give a damn. But try and convince me otherwise. Because if you're not out there fighting for the First Amendment, if you're out there believing that this doesn't impact you, then you're stupid and you're lazy.
Mhm.
Now, I'm hopeful that there will be enough Americans who, after they get pissed at me, will at least look in the mirror and reflect on it and say, God, he has a point. What can I do to be smarter and not so lazy? And the answer is to be a good citizen, to be active. But to be a good citizen, you have to know the Constitution. You have to defend the Constitution. You can't defend that which you don't know and understand. And if you don't understand what the First Amendment is, what freedom of the press is, what freedom of association is, uh, then learn about it. Read the Supreme Court precedents. You don't have to be a lawyer.
Mhm.
But you know, citizenship is not imbued on those who practice law automatically. It's
Right.
it's it's our birthright. Or we came over, and the irony is, if you come over as an immigrant, you actually had to take a test on the Constitution to become a citizen.
Mhm.
Imagine that's the other question I'd ask all the people out there who get mad at me. How dare you? How dare you? Really, on a drop of a hat right now, take the constitutional test for citizenship. Just take it. No prep, because you're an American citizen. You know America. You know take the test. I'll tell you right now, 90% of you will fail the test because you don't know America. You don't know the Constitution. Therefore, you don't know what it means to be an American, because the definition of what America is set forth in the Constitution. It's set forth that which we stand for, the values, the ideals. And if you don't know those, you can't defend them. And if you can't defend them, then what the hell good are you? You're
Is
just a thief of oxygen.
so do you think that Julian Assange is gonna go quietly into the night? Do you think we've heard the last of him?
I don't know. I'm sure he'll give an interview here and there, but again, I don't want to come off as critical because I'm not in his shoes. I can't say I would definitely do X, Y, and Z. But once you surrender, you've trained yourself to surrender. Once you give up, that will define you forever. I don't think he has the fight in him anymore. I think he
Uh-huh.
was broken. They broke Julian Assange. Now,
And
you
and
know,
he's still a young man, right?
you're not that young. I
He's
mean,
in his 40s, maybe?
yeah, but he was in isolation for 5 years. That I would imagine that ages you somewhat. I imagine his health isn't the way it is. I don't think mentally he's what he was. I don't think he has the fire in him anymore. Maybe he can prove me wrong, but I also don't believe that the circumstances are such that he will be empowered in the way. Because what made WikiLeaks was his, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead approach towards publishing this information. That man's gone. That man was broken. That man who once did that is no longer alive today. What's left is a man who is defeated. Now, he's alive, he's with his wife, he's with his children, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But I just don't want to downplay the consequences of the American victory over Julian Assange. They broke this man. They made him plead guilty to a crime he didn't commit.
So do you think that's the ultimate lesson for the Americans to understand?
You can't understand a lesson unless you understand the material that's being taught, Cynthia.
Okay.
All right. I mean, it's hard for me to talk about what lessons they're learning. Do
Okay.
they know the Constitution? Do they know what the First Amendment is? Do they know how it's been defined by the Supreme Court? Do they know what the freedom of association is? Do they know what the boundaries are that's set by the Supreme Court? And if you don't know it, then shut up, because all you're doing is blabbering, blabbering, blabbering. You're wasting time. You're burning oxygen. You can't defend that which you don't understand. And most of the American people don't understand the Constitution. And so, they need, I think we need collectively to understand we have to do a better job of fighting for this country. I keep hearing people, especially God, in this electoral cycle, I've given up. Well, the hell with you then. If you've given up, shut up and disappear. You don't matter anymore. That's the reality. If you've given up, you don't matter anymore. I'm not going to vote. Then you don't matter anymore, literally. In a democracy where the one weapon the American people has is the vote, your decision not to vote speaks volumes about who you are and what you are as a citizen. Well, my vote doesn't count. Make it count. Make it count. I'll help you. We're doing a rally on September 28th.
Okay, so we're gonna get into that in a few minutes. Ultimately, give your opinion of this whole Assange thing.
It's a massive defeat for the American people, a massive defeat for freedom, a massive defeat for liberty. It's a defeat. There's nothing positive comes out of this except for the fact that Julian Assange has been reunited with his family, that he's not going to die in a cell in Belmarsh prison. And in some ways, that's a small victory. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a huge defeat.
Wow. So you've got a number of things on your plate. Number one, how's your book doing, your brand new book?
You mean this one?
Yes.
It's we're trying to sell it. I think we're getting some numbers in. I don't know what's going on with Amazon because I don't think while people are buying it on Amazon, it hasn't been shipped to Amazon yet. Got a problem with getting it out of the printers. The Clarity Press is the one place you can get it right now, print to order, or you can get the ebook, and they're moving some copies. I have an event on July 20th at the Farmers and Chefs restaurant in Poughkeepsie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dinner slash book signing slash talk, question and answer. The price of the ticket gets you a book, and so if you come and eat dinner, you get a book, and I'll sign it, and we can have a nice conversation. I did one before with at Farmers and Chefs about with my Disarmament at the Time of Perestroika book. It was extraordinarily successful, full house. Everybody walked away believing that it was a high quality event, and I have no reason to doubt that what we're going to do on July 20th will be of a similar nature.
So how's things going with your movie, and how's things going with your passport?
Well, the passport, we'll find out. I mean, I've begun the process of getting a new one, and we'll just see how the U.S. government behaves. So, it is what it is. We just got to go forward and initiate action, and then see how the government reacts. I'm convinced that I will get a passport, and I'm convinced that I'll resume traveling, and I'm convinced that that'll happen before the year's out. Let's just put it that way. The movie, of course, the Waging Peace Project, was contingent upon me going to Russia, and that right now is on hold. We have to see what the circumstances are when I get the passport, where I stand. Can it be revived? Do we have to modify it? Do we have to do something? I mean, I'll be honest, I don't want to get into it too much, but my friend Alexander Zyryanov is in prison right now in Russia. He was my host. He was my partner. He was the man that made it all happen. And I believe he's in prison on trumped up corruption charges. The man didn't commit a crime. His only crime was daring to challenge political entities, local political entities in Novosibirsk. And they've imprisoned him. Right now, as we speak, he's in isolation or severe form. He hasn't done anything wrong. They're just trying to break him. They put him in what is the equivalent of a sweat box for 24 hours a day for 10 days straight. And then they try and get him to plead guilty and then sign papers that send him off to fight and die in the war. Is this really the Russia that Vladimir Putin wants? I hope not. But I have to say that the treatment of Alexander Zyryanov will play a major factor in whether or not I have the enthusiasm for engaging with Russia again. I worked very hard with Alexander Zyryanov to see Russia, to meet the Russian people, and I will always cherish those trips. And I believe that everything I did there was viable and valid. But it would be very hard for me to go back to Russia with the same level of enthusiasm, knowing that my good friend, the man who helped me initiate this program, was was treated the way he is. In America, we have a corrupt prison system. In Russia, apparently, they have a corrupt prison system too. Um, that shouldn't change the strategic outlook, but I'm not saying I won't go back to Russia, but I'm just saying that it'd be hard for me to make a movie about promoting Russia as this great society when Alexander Zuryanov is treated the way that he is. So hopefully the Russians will end up doing the right thing.
When
And
did that happen?
he was arrested on June 3rd, the day that I was supposed to travel to Russia.
Who that's shocking. Who's responsible for that, in
Well,
your opinion?
we don't know. That's the thing. We just don't know who's responsible for it. There's a lot of speculation, but we don't know who's. I will tell you this though, that the idea that my passport seizure and his arrest are not related in any way, I'm not buying into that yet. I'm thinking that they are related, and I'm thinking that there are people in Russia and in the United States that simply didn't want me to go to Russia during this time. And now my co-host is the man who I cooperate with is in prison.
That's pretty shocking.
It's very shocking.
Very, yes. So, how is your rally coming along?
Well, we're in the early stages of it. I'll be meeting with Gerald Salante, who is the organizer. Once we establish the realm of possibility,
Mm.
then we will move forward in it. But the idea is to create an issue centered on promoting nuclear disarmament, saying no to nuclear war, promoting arms control, because this is the existential issue of this election. Nothing else matters. If we have a nuclear war, nothing else matters. And you can sit here and tell me how upset you are about either candidate. I don't care. One of them, or somebody from those respective parties, is going to be the next president of the United States. And that person will be the commander in chief who has control over our nuclear arsenal. Rather than hoping and praying that they do the right thing, I think it's imperative that we make our vote count and compel them to do the right thing by making sure they know that they cannot win this election. And here's the key. We are looking at a nation that's fundamentally divided. We're looking at roughly 50-50 vote. We know in the last two elections, the person that won in a handful of states, key battleground states, with margins of tens of thousands of votes. Well, if we can capture hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of votes in each one of these constituencies and say this vote goes to the person that articulates the best policy when it comes to nuclear war, those candidates will have to listen. They will have no choice but to listen, because a failure to listen means that the race will swing to the other candidate. So this is about empowering American citizenship, empowering American democracy to save democracy, save America, save the world by empowering your vote in November. So that's the purpose of this rally. And so far, people seem to be enthusiastic, but the proof is always in the pudding. We'll find out.
So, is Dennis Kucinich involved in this?
Dennis is very supportive. Dennis is very supportive of it.
Okay.
The extent to which we can integrate Dennis or Diane Sayre or other well-meaning candidates is still needs to be resolved, because we can't allow this to be seen as a partisan rally. The whole concept here is that no party owns the vote. That there's only one cause. The votes that we're trying to get committed to this cause are linked not to a party, not to a platform, not to a person, but to the cause of stopping a nuclear war, promoting nuclear disarmament, promoting arms control. And so we need to make sure that we don't allow it to be perceived as being hijacked by candidates who will say, because then they'll say, well, this is really just a disguised political rally for those people. No, it's not a disguised political rally. It's a political rally for the American people, American citizenship, and the concept of representative democracy.
Now, you said you wanted to go national with this, correct?
Yeah, the goal is to target the swing states and other critical demographics to see if we can corner enough of the vote to turn them into battleground states. I mean, if I can go to San Francisco and we can get 1 million Californians to say, yeah, our vote is tied to this issue, suddenly California becomes a battleground state. Here in New York, we can get 1 million people to say, yeah, that's our. Suddenly, New York becomes a battleground state. Nothing's taken for granted. We know Michigan will be a battleground state. We know Wisconsin is. We know Ohio is. But maybe we can turn some other states into a battleground state as well. State whose electoral votes are needed by a candidate if they want to be the next president of the United States.
So you have a lot to work on over the next couple of months.
Well, I figured if I can't go to Russia, I might as well put my put myself to use. So yeah.
So, in closing, share your book again so people interested might purchase it. Okay, that's
So,
great.
so covering Ukraine. It says the Scott Ritter interviews through the eyes of Anya Kay. Basically, it's for over 2 years. Anya Kay, who is a alternative media podcaster, not someone who, heavily grounded in geopolitics. He was more dealing with more spiritual things. But when the war in Ukraine started, she felt spiritually about it. So she reached out to talk to people. And one of the people she reached out to was me. And I found her to be a very effective interviewer. She came in with no bias. She just wanted to know not just the truth, but truth that was sort of emotional and in nature. And she asked very good questions. And over the time from our first interview up until our the last one we covered, which was I think in May, um, her questions covered the entire spectrum of the war. And so what we did is we picked the most relevant questions and we turned those into chapters. And now we have a book that literally is about covering the Ukraine conflict, covering how she covered it through me as an observer over the course of the conflict. It's a timely book. It's a comprehensive book. And I think, it's an approachable book too. I mean, many times people will write books about conflicts that are, this thick. And if you take it to the beach, you end up getting sunburned because you fell asleep and the sun fried you. This is a very thin book. It's 120 pages. This is literally summer reading. Get this book, go to the beach, read it. But what I can guarantee you is after you read it, you're not going to put it away. You're going to go back and reread it. And then the other thing you're going to do is you're going to take your cell phone and you're going to go to the end of each chapter where we have QR codes embedded. And this will take you to the total interview. So even though the chapter is just a question from a particular interview, the interviews tend to be over an hour in length. They'll take you straight to the interview itself so you can see the interview, the emotion, see how the question was asked, see how the question was answered. It'll bring to life the words that were on the page. And this book, which can be read in a couple of hours, will become a project of empowerment through knowledge and information that can go on for weeks, if not months. So it's a great value. You buy this book, it's going to make you stronger intellectually about the conflict in Ukraine.
So, Scott, I'm sure we'll be talking again fairly soon. So you've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Scott, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.